Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart and it's time for a bit of an introduction video for a new project. Now, I'm sure you'll have all guessed from the title of the video that this is a 15mm Pacific project that I'm starting. It's a theatre that I was drawn into a few months back actually. I didn't originally plan to play it in this scale. I made the mistake of watching the HBO series. I think it was just before Christmas, could be after now, my memory's fading, and watching things like that are always dangerous for a wargamer, at least for me anyway. I have to be careful where my inspiration comes from. Sometimes I know that watching something will inspire me to a new project and I deliberately avoid it, especially when I have lots of projects on, of which I definitely do. But I watched it anyway, and it's strange that I hadn't seen it. I've seen Band of Brothers a number of times and thought it was excellent, but I never got round to watching the Pacific. So I bought the box set on Blu-ray and devoured it relatively quickly. And from that point on, I knew that I wanted to do a project based on the Pacific. And at the time I still am, working on a bolt action project in North Africa, British at the moment, 8th Army, and I hadn't even started working on a side to face them, and I usually like to do both sides. It means that I'm free enough to do whatever projects I want to, and then I can drag someone in to play the other side if they don't, already game in that era or that particular conflict. So I actually geared up to do a bolt action project. I bought the Island Assault box set, and bought a few add-ons to it as well, some extra bits, wrote 2 sort of 1,000-point-ish army lists to sort of build my collection around, and then bought lots of books and things that I needed as well. So the first thing I did was to kind of head back to the books and started flicking through my US and Imperial Japan army lists for bold action, and then got out the theatre books. So we got Empire in Flames, and then the newer one, the Mariana and Palau Islands. And this is the one that struck me most, and also the one that struck me most in the Pacific programs. And I really like the episodes based around Peleliu. It struck me. I think it was because it wasn't just all kind of jungle, and the battle around the airfield and in the mountains, and it felt that I could base a project around 3 quite distinct different tables. So you have the beach landings, and you do have that bit of kind of South Pacific jungle type thing, or the palm trees around the beach, and then you've got the very battle weary and bombed out airfield, and then you have the really shelled out mountains where it's just burnt out stubs of trees and mud and things. And I just felt that it was visually and as a painter more than a gamer, visually it just really struck, and partly that's the way it was filmed, but they definitely stood out to me more than some of the other actions that was covered by the series. But then the project stalled, really. It reached the stage that things often do, where it was waiting for me to finish my current bolt action project, and I had a lot of other things on the go. And around that time, the Epic Battles Napoleonic range was announced, and I was very lucky to get some review stock from Warlord Games, and a lot of my planned hobby projects towards the end of last year sort of went on hold, really. And then we find ourselves at the beginning of the summer of 22, and the nagging is still there to do the Pacific project, but it needed a bit of a change, really. And the first change was I was never going to get around to painting enough 28mm miniatures, so I thought I'd go for a bit of a change in scale, and that's where I decided to start hunting around to see what I could find. And in Battlefront for Flames of War, I thought I'd start there, but they've obviously changed their system quite a lot in the recent years, and I've never been a Flames of War player really, but I found that you couldn't get quite what you needed anymore. They were older ranges, and then if they were older, I really want metal miniatures and things. I really like the idea of plastics, so I started looking around at Plastic Soldier Company, and even the new Victrix range and the 12mm ones. They're really nice, and I thought, I really want to do something with plastic, but they didn't cover the US Marine Corps, and they didn't cover the Imperial Japanese Army, and it just wasn't going to work for the theatre. I decided plough ahead and see if I could find somewhere to get some miniatures. I recently bought a 3D printer and started printing, so I went straight looking for some files and I started hunting around, and that's where I found 3D Breed's March to Hell World War II ranges, which I hadn't come across before. They clearly were Kickstarters, and the range is quite substantial. There's more than just the Pacific Theatre. But that's why I found those ranges and started flicking through, and they're fantastic. Now they're a little bit stocky and chubby compared to the more realistic look that I would often be drawn to, but I was really impressed by the quality of the sculpts of the faces and their hands and things. It really gives them good character. And one of the things I hate when I paint miniatures is miniatures that don't really have those features. I've found painting some of the older Flames of War miniatures for commissions, I found them a little bit kind of soulless really when they're like that, and that's just me. There's nothing wrong with those miniatures, and if you are painting basically to get large armies on the table, that's probably all you need. But as someone that's more drawn to the visual sides of things, I really wanted miniatures with character, and that's not always easy to do in smaller scale, and a lot of the older style sculpts and things just don't have that for me. That's partly why I like the quality of the Warlord Games Epic Battles ranges. They're not for everyone, but I really like the quality of the sculpts and the character there are in their faces, and then that kind of detail is fairly crisp. So I was looking for that kind of thing, but in a World War II miniature. Now the newer Flames of War stuff looks pretty good from Battlefront, and like I said, the Plastic Soldier stuff looks pretty good, but it just didn't cover what I needed. So finding this range was that was the moment really when I realised that was it. I was going to do it. So I bought some files, bought the inventory packs from both ranges. I didn't want to buy the full tank packs. I didn't really feel they were going to match the battles that I wanted to play really. I wanted to do mainly infantry focus, especially with it being a Pacific kind of island assaults and things. And then I had to really start thinking about rules. So if I'm playing 15mm, what was I going to play? Now there are a lot of rules out there at the moment, and I'm a regular viewer of the Plastic Crack podcast, and I remember their Facebook group, and then lots of people who were playing O Group, and I had a little look at it, and it looks pretty good, but I just didn't want to play that much of an abstracted game. I wanted, for World War II, I wanted it to be, the miniatures to generally be 1-for-1. Flames of War I looked at again, but it's really strange, but I've never been attracted to the way their game looks, so to speak. The miniatures, their infantry miniatures just look odd for me on those square bases. It's a bizarre thing to go, to not pick a war game on, but it's something that just doesn't quite attract me. So I looked at bolt action again, and I looked at maybe playing it in 15mm, and that is something I may well do as part of this project. But I wanted a cool rule set to build it around. So I was flicking through the scenarios around Peleliu in the bolt action source book, and I like the kind of scenarios that are there. I just wanted maybe a few men, so slightly bigger than a bolt action size game, but still keeping it 1-for-1. And that's when I sort of came across Battlegroup. Now, I've only recently picked up a copy of Soldiers of Napoleon to use with my epic armies as a bit of an alternative to Black Powder. And I found it excellent, and it's written by Warwick Kinraid, and Battlegroup is written by him. So finding a game that kind of looked like it handled the size of game I was looking for, but also by an author that I really impressed by the recent rulebook that I just read, I thought that maybe there'll be something there. And I picked up Battlegroup, and it looks like exactly what I need. It's a little bit more in depth than bolt action, or quite a bit more in depth than bolt action in some ways, but not really a particularly complex game in terms of its core mechanics. And it uses an order structure, which is resource management, and I always like resource management in games. And you can play the game in different sizes, the main ones being squad and platoon that I'd be looking at. So I'm going to be looking at platoon size games, which in 15mm you can play on a 6x4. I think reading the rules and looking at the way it works, I think if you do play larger than that, the game could be quite slow anyway. And I spoke to a few people about it. In all the feedback I've had from the game, from the people who know the rules, have described it in a way that it sounds fantastic. That maybe slows down a little bit at the larger point sizes. So I made the decision that I was going with this 15mm range, and that I was going to be using Battlegroup and basing my images individually, which does mean that I can go and play bolt action in 15mm, maybe just changing all the distances to 15mm, so to 2 centimeters rather. And that means that if I play a game with my young son, and he wanted to play that, it might be an easier system for him to understand rather than something like Battlegroup and Resource Management. Moving chits from a bag or dice from a bag is a little bit more tangible and straightforward for beginners and things. Now, Battlegroup is published by Plastic Soldier Company, so I know it's linked with Artoris Games with Warwick, but I believe I don't know whether it's commissioned by them, but they definitely print it and publish it. Well, they publish it anyway, and it seems to be Battlegroup's home is on the Plastic Soldier Company website. I guess it's the companion to their own 15mm and 20mm figures, and that makes sense for them to publish their own set of rules. And what's great about it is they do these fantastic theatre guides, which are basically army lists and scenarios and background and things as well. And these are hefty tomes. This is a hardback tome, really, really fantastic. And it's I was able to grab it and it be the kind of the guide alongside the historical stuff and ideas from the bolt action books, which I'll still use, but obviously the rules parts won't work when I'm playing Battlegroup. But you have this lovely, well-produced, detailed books. They have the army lists and they have scenarios as well. So you can play kind of a match point style system, or you can do completely narrative-based scenarios. It's all there in this chunky book. So I started looking at the files, STL files that I had, and I really wanted to build a list, which is not always the most sensible thing to do. As soon as you've started a war game, you want to read all the rules through and think about it that way. But that's not the way I game. I am a visual gamer. I am a historically minded gamer in many ways, and I love toy soldiers. So I wanted to build some kind of starter-ish lists, and so I knew what to print and what to start painting. And it's not as straightforward with these sets of lists compared to some other rule sets. It's not quite as directive about what you do. There are some things you have to take in order to take something else, but it's very open and there's so many choices. I was left a little bit bewildered, so I was scratching my head a little bit, and then I put a post up in the Plastic Crack Podcast's Facebook group. And I had this brilliantly detailed response from Bjorn, who runs the Crossing Obstacles Gaming YouTube channel. And I'd come across his channel before, and I'd actually he linked it in there about watching it, kind of an introductory what you need to get started with Battlegroup. And it's a very good video, and I would recommend that you head over to his channel and watch that if you are interested. I'll pop a link in the show description. So I fired him a message on Facebook and did ask him lots and lots of questions, and it was absolutely fantastic. He came back to me with loads and loads and loads of detail, answered lots of my silly questions, and it really helped me get an idea of how to write my sort of at least initial lists. And while the lists aren't necessarily the right things to take, I ended up writing, and now around just over 500, probably 550 points per side, of which I wouldn't take all in one go necessarily, but it's there as a kind of a varied list that I could swap in, maybe use 400 points of it, but swap in and out other things. So I wouldn't blame him for my bad lists. He didn't tell me what to write, but he did give me some hints and tips and things like that. So yeah, thank you very much to him. Now I also asked him, or suggested to him, that what would be really good would be a fantastic how to play starter video for newer players, and I'm going to be well off doing that. That's not going to be the intention of this project. It's going to be about the building of the painting of the miniatures and building towards some games, and I think he may be doing that, and that may be out by the time this video comes out. It may not be at all, and I may be putting even more pressure on him to do it. But do check his channel out, because I believe that's something that might happen, and he's got lots of other cool stuff on there anyway, so well worth looking at. Now, I intend to focus a lot more on the armies and the miniatures in the subsequent videos, to keep this, which is already stretching on a bit of a monologue, from getting much longer. But as you can see from the images across the screen now, that I have actually printed a fair deal, and I've printed everything I need and more for the sort of initial batch of painting. As I said, over 500 points worth in Battlegroup numbers for each side. So a comfortable platoon of each with lots of supporting factors. Now I will show you a couple of the miniatures a little bit closer up, because this wouldn't be a wargaming video unless we looked at some toy soldiers. Now, like I've said, everything apart from the LVT4s have been printed from March de Hell. Now this wasn't, and I knew I was struggling to find a file for these, and I was looking at maybe buying some from Skytrax, and you need a couple. But if I could print it all, that would be fantastic. And thank you to Adrian, who sent me a link to a Thingiverse user, who M Bergman, which people may well have heard of before, who's got an absolutely huge range of vehicles, World War II vehicles that he's done, and this was his LVT. I will pop a link again in the description for that, for people who want to go and see all the things that are there. But as I said, this isn't a perfect print. I'm still learning, but this will paint up very well, I imagine. Now, it being the Pacific, I didn't want to go too tank heavy, so I didn't, rather than purchasing the files for all of the tanks from March de Hell, I just picked up a couple. So I've got an M3 Stuart and this M4 Sherman as well. And it's a nice little print, and I'm going to have lots of fun painting it. And I'll probably do a painting tutorial on this one. Just to show you how I will focus on painting sort of armour in this scale. Now, if I move on to other theatres in this scale, which I may well do now, because March de Hell has some lovely ranges for other theatres, if I need whole platoons of tanks, I may well go to plastic kits, just for speed really, rather than printing off individual tanks at a go. But because I only needed a couple, I think I printed off one Japanese tank. Then I thought the 3D printing option was a nice way to go to start with. Now, I'm using Warbase's movement trays. At the moment, you can see it's part planned. I'm going to be filling in holes on some of these, turning them into sort of scenic, almost little Dear Army display things, but they're not squared off bases, which means that that doesn't wind me up too much, and I can remove casualties as well. And if I do want to play bolt action in 15mm, I can take them completely off, and I'll probably even magnetise the Jeep transports and so on. These are some Japanese models here. Now let's have a slightly closer look at a couple of the infantry models, and you can see how well they print. So this is the US Marine officer, and as I said, I'm new to printing. I'm sure someone with a little bit more skill in refining the printer settings and things may be able to get a crisper version of this, but I'm pretty happy with this, and that it's more than detailed enough and compares very well with many things you can purchase out there. So I'm overall pretty happy with them, and as I say, I like the sculpts. So this is a Japanese infantryman here, and again, I think the quality matches the same on both sides, so I'm pretty happy with these. And what it says to me is that I'm going to have fun painting these, which I did when I'll show you a couple of painted ones now. So this is a test piece which is turned into something I'm going to use in the army, because I was happy with the way it came out. I'm not going to list the paints and things now. I will do a painting tutorial for this. I will for the US Marine as well, but this is a Japanese infantryman. But I will say I did what I usually do for miniatures of this scale. So prime black, zenithal prime highlight using white, and then contrast paint as a base, and then I'm using highlights on top, and in two highlights in most cases, one in some. and my test model for my US Marines as well. Had to play around a little bit more with the colour of the greens. They're kind of blue, grey, green uniform. Took me a little bit longer to nail down his scheme, but again, he will be fine making his way into my army now rather than just a test piece. And I really enjoy painting them. And I think that now I've got the scheme down, they will paint up very, very quickly. And that's it. That's the end of the introductory video. Now the plan is that I will spend a little bit more time showing you the other miniatures, and the next video will probably be delving deeper a little bit into the armies, and showing you the other miniatures that I've printed and the models that I've chosen for the collection, in terms of choices for the army, but also choices for the miniatures. And I'll show you some images of the few files that I haven't purchased that you can print, and how I might use those in the future as well. There's also some cool defences and things like that. I'll cover a bit of terrain as well, so I'm going to be, well, I've already ordered some custom terrain from Wall Paint Miniatures. I will cover those in more detail when I get them in the future, and I'll talk about the map that I've already purchased and the terrain I already started making back many months ago. And how I intend to continue doing that. So there's going to be definitely a vlog episode on the terrain setup and the visuals and my plans for that, and there will be one looking at the armies in a little bit more detail. And then in between those vlog videos, I'll do what I normally do. Occasionally I'll do a review of anything that I pick up and buy, which will probably include the war paint jungle terrain that I've ordered. But then I'd also do some painting tutorials as a commission painter by trade. I do like to do painting tutorials, and they seem to be fairly well received. And I think a lot of the techniques I use people will be able to carry them over into 28mm, to be honest with you, but then also to other game systems. You don't have to play Battlegroup, but any World War II. So if you're playing O-Group at the moment, or if you're playing Flames of War, a lot of the things I do you should be able to use in those games as well. So hopefully, even if you're not going to play Battlegroup, but you do play World War II, I'm sure a lot of people do, and I know a lot of people that watch the channel do, then hopefully you find it useful. But anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. If you are new to the channel, have a little look around at the other videos, maybe subscribe if you like what's there, give the video a like, it always helps. But I really appreciate you watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.